Welcome to Belfast, Wales. My name is Jonathan Watson, and today's guest is Jerry Hyde. Jerry, welcome to Belfast, Wales. Good to have you on.
Thank you.
Your new book, basically latest book, Empathy for the Devil. Make your demons work for you without selling your soul. That's right now. We'll touch on that book in a wee second. You've been basically you work as a psychotherapist. How did you get into psychotherapy? What got you into doing that?
Rock and roll, too much, enjoying life too much, partying too much. I ended up with, I don't know, call it a drug habit. Yeah, I mean, I was using it stopped being fun, but I was still using drugs. It wasn't especially heavy narcotics as such. But, even cannabis, it's seen as a soft drug, but it's got, if you abuse anything, it's harmful. So I think I was sedating myself too much, and I stopped. And when I stopped, I think everything I'd been avoiding for years caught up with me almost overnight. So I went and saw a therapist, and I thought, I'll go for a couple of sessions and sort myself out. And 30 years later, I'm still doing one thing or another. But I think I realized very quickly, I think I could do this. And, music hadn't worked out, film hadn't worked out, all the things I'd been doing hadn't really worked out. And I don't mean to be cynical, it was very real, but it was like, well, this turns the kind of shitstorm that my life has been into a bunch of qualifications rather than a series of disasters, because you can learn so much in terms of skills as a therapist, but I really think that life is what qualifies you. So, having some experience of the businesses I'd been around or in, and, difficult kind of classic white middle class English upbringing, but, with all the repression that goes with that. And, I think it made sense, and it was something I had a feeling for.
Yeah, you're saying about that. There's a person I know, and they worked as basically as a police officer, and especially during the troubles here in Northern Ireland. And they said they were dealing with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and they were sent to referred to like a psychologist or but when they went in, this guy's in his 50s. This was like this really young wee girl in her early 20s, and he was telling her about some of the stuff, and she was like, yeah, I really understand what you're going through. I understand. And he's like, how could you possibly? Like, you're a young girl, and she's like, I'm not having to go at you. He says, but you could never understand. And she's like, yeah, you're okay. You're right. I know in your bio, this is a point we can make. You mentioned you follow a fairly conventional career as a psychotherapist. And then basically, as you said, you eventually lost the plot. What happened, and what direction did that then take you from there, after obviously you went through that?
I mean, I'd lived a very rock and roll life throughout my 20s, and I think there was something in me that was just trying to make amends for some of that stuff, or fit in, belong. I think a lot of it was about belonging. When I grew up, I'd had a lot of learning difficulties at school, and I think I remember being told when I left school, well, yeah, you're unemployable, so don't even bother trying to get a job, which was actually true in the end. I mean, I am unemployable. I'm not good at working for other people. I'm better at working for myself. But in my 30s, I think I just wanted to fit in. I'd lived in squats, and I'd lived very on the edge of society. So, I thought, I'd like to get the house and the car and all that kind of the career. So I did that, and I'm glad I did it. but it kind of left a big part of me behind, that more, I don't know, yeah, rock and roll for want of a better word. And I think my 40s was really about bringing the two together. So, my marriage fell apart. I got thrown out of the training organization that I worked for. And I think a lot of people thought that was it. My career was over and my life was over. And actually, it was kind of the beginning. I mean, it was a very difficult midlife crisis type moment. But those two polarities, those two parts of me, both have value. And I think it's easy to deny parts of ourselves, but both those parts had value. And it wasn't until I brought them together in a less conventional form of therapy. I mean, the baseline is conventional. My training is conventional, but I don't think I'm necessarily what you'd describe as conventional. So I attract a lot of people who feel comfortable talking to someone like me. I think a lot of therapy, it's like any relationship. A lot of it's about chemistry.
Yeah,
It's not about the letters you got after your name or your qualifications or some expertise. You've got to want to talk to the person, like you say, with the policeman. It's not that this young woman's not good at her job, but you kind of want to talk to someone you can relate to. I mean, when I started, I think I was 31, and there was a truth that people would come in and kind of take one look at me and go, "What do you know about life?" Now that doesn't happen anymore because I'm old, but which is a relief. I think it helps if you've lived a bit, and it's not necessarily a young person's game. So there's all that to it.
But midlife crisis, you hear them kind of quite a lot, and I think sometimes they kind of go down to generic guy buys a motorcycle, trades the wife in for the secretary, a blonde secretary. Um, if I can ask, what do you, in your experience and working with people, what is the essence of like a midlife crisis? Is it kind of maybe we're living a life because we're living life in a way that we feel that's the way I have to live, and it's kind of like as you get older, your brain, something deep inside kind of comes, it goes, no, have to change course. I don't feel comfortable. Are you able to kind of give that essence of what a midlife crisis is?
Yeah, I mean, Carl Jung said round about 42 is when the box that you've kind of locked your shadow side in, the locks break and it comes bursting out. I think that's as good a description of this midlife moment. I don't think it has to be a crisis, although it often is, but I think it's when there's an opportunity to become more three-dimensional. Because we all want to be nice. Most of us want to be nice. We want to fit in. We want to be accepted by whatever tribe we've got. And I think 40s, particularly for men, I think it's maybe it's different for women, but as a man, I think it's when some of that denied self catches up with you, and you either face it, you either turn and face it, and you integrate it, which I did in a kind of messy way, or you deny it and you get the sports car and the Latvian girlfriend or something, and because there's a denial of death that comes with it as well. Anyone who's hit kind of early 40s, you're not necessarily close to death, hopefully, but I think your sense of immortality is probably gone by then. There's an awareness that you're kind of approaching the halfway mark, and that this thing doesn't last forever. And there's a deepening that goes with it. I think it's a beautiful moment, but I think with any transition in life, the part that's dying for the new part to emerge, the part that's dying puts up a fight. It doesn't want to die any more than any of us wants to die, right? It's a part of ourselves, or a sense of who we are as this kind of young virile guy, you realize, no, I'm not anymore. I'm not that guy. I'm getting on a bit here. So I think there can be a struggle. But I think these somewhat negative values, it's like calling a 2-year-old, it's like labeling it the terrible twos. I always thought that's a bit of a setup. If you say that, you can guarantee that's how you're going to experience your children. I never experienced my children like that at all. I thought it was an amazing time of life. But if you label it as a terrible time, that's what it's going to be. And the same with the midlife crisis. There's, I'm not a big fan of therapy speak, but there's a few phrases I like, and I like this reframing of they say break through rather than break down. And I think a midlife crisis can be a breakdown, but it can also be a breakthrough when you become more substantial, more three-dimensional. Is he German? I think Eckhart Tolle is German. He says the biggest obstacle to change is our attachment to our persona. So, you grow up and you start to get an idea of who you are and what clothes you like and what car you like and what food you like and what kind of people you like to hang out with. And it becomes a kind of identity that we get very attached to. And then I think when you hit your 40s, it's one of those times where you go, maybe this isn't who I am. And that can be very confusing. It can be distressing. In my case, my father had been he's still alive, as far as I know, a very troubled alcoholic and serial adulterer who cheated on my mum throughout their marriage, before they got married, all the way through. And like a lot of guys, I swore I was going to be a better dad than him, and I was not going to be like him, especially with the cheating. Okay, I became an addict, so I didn't make it there. But the cheating, I would have bet my life, I would have sworn on my children's lives, I would never ever cheat on my wife. So when I think I was 42, it's like, who is this person? I don't relate to this person because I'd pushed that part of me away. And so I think a lot of the darker sides of myself that I didn't really want to be caught up with me, and I had to confront them, and I had to go, well, it's not enough to say I'm not a cheat. I have to accept that clearly I am, and that's something I need to get to know rather than deny, because it's by getting to know ourselves that we take charge and we make different choices. If you just deny it, it can take you by surprise, which it did with me.
Yeah. There's if you go online now, even if anyone has an Instagram account or like a Facebook account, and if you kind of maybe look at an interest like self-help along lines that there, you'll get literally, and I suppose the meaning is intentionally good. You're going to get a lot of stuff, almost drawing information. I can help you. Answer. If someone's going through like a midlife crisis, or just say a midlife transformation or reevaluation, there we go, or self-audit, how, and I'm really going to ask you to try and simplify this if it's possible. I know it's probably not. How can someone going through that, how can they figure out, get almost like they're on a kind of landscape, and all of a sudden all the familiar landmarks are gone and they're lost, they don't have their map anymore. How do you find out who you are? How do you self-orientate so you can kind of start moving forward and figure this new phase out? If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Does it fit into our culture anymore? I think in the past we probably had more ritualized, ceremonial ways of dealing with, you'd have a rite of passage as from boyhood to manhood. I mean, personally, when I was in my 40s, I did a lot of things that in Native American culture they call vision quest. It's not, the periods of solitude and fasting aren't unique to any culture. That they're in Christianity, they're in Islam. So for me, I think to go away, some of it was therapy. None of it was reading. I don't read occasionally write self-help books, but I don't really read them very much. But actually just going off by myself for a few days and sitting without any food, I don't know how to meditate. I've never practiced meditation, but just to take myself away from interaction with other people, away from food. If you fast, that puts you into a kind of meditative state. And just sit and be with myself, I think helped. It sounds like an oversimplification, but so I mean, most cultures have that kind of solitude as one way of meeting yourself, right? Because we're all so busy. Now, it used to be when I was younger, you'd say to someone, "How are you?" and they go, "Yeah, I'm all right." That was the kind of generic bullshit response. "Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. Yourself?" Now you ask anyone how they are, and it's like, "Oh, I'm just so busy, man. I mean, just super, super busy. Yeah, really, really coming on to." And that bit seems to have become the generic response because we are all so busy. We're all so overstimulated. We're all bombarded with emails and texts and God knows what else. Yeah. So sometimes just to sit and catch up with yourself can help.
Yeah.
There's no one answer. I mean, I could list you lots of things, like there's plant medicine, which I've explored. There's vision quest, which I've explored. There's therapy, which I've explored. That small amount of meditation, any of these things. But I don't think there's a formula as such. I think you have to get some support. Men particularly will almost, I'm going to kind of contradict what I just said. We'll almost do too much on our own, but that's not the same as choosing solitude. That's just kind of going in the shed and, distracting. So it helps to have mentors. It helps to have people who can confront you. I run a lot of men's groups, and I think that's a good place because they're supportive, but they're also confronting, and people challenge each other. And I think that's healthy. We don't have a lot of that in our society.
No. It's definitely there's a few things that you mentioned. Definitely want to touch on. Basically, you've got over 27 years experience as a clinical psychotherapist. What is it that you kind of sets you apart from your peers within the same profession? Because I know kind of like part of the way as such. Are you able to kind of go into more about that?
I mean, when it comes to finding a psychotherapist, in the first place, I'm not quite answering your question, but I think it's important to say it's about chemistry.
Yeah.
So for some people, I'm the best therapist in the world. For some people, I'm the worst. What makes me different is perhaps, actually, I don't really want to compare because I don't know. I don't hang out with therapists. I don't really, I used to, but I think I chose a path, or I had a path kind of thrust upon me that I embraced, where I'm very transparent. I'm not a fan of being on a pedestal, which someone in my role, you can get placed on a pedestal. So I do my best to get off it, because when you're on a pedestal, there's only one way you're going, and that's down, right? So I do my best to be transparent where appropriate, by which I mean I share a lot of myself, but I don't just sit and talk about my problems. I'll use my own struggles, my own frailties, my own weaknesses, my own wounds. That's kind of my toolkit. It's not books by Jung or Freud on the whole. It's my life experience. And I think that's a skill. You have to know when to share and when to keep something back. But I'm probably more transparent than most. I don't abide by any code of ethics. I don't like ethics in a prescribed form. But I think it's good to know what constitutes ethics. It's like if you're going to throw the rule book out the window, you need to learn it first. If you just chuck it out the window first, you're probably going to be reckless or dangerous. So I don't follow any code of ethics. There's I don't know if you know Osho, the Indian teacher, spiritual teacher, but he said morality is so that people don't have to think for themselves. It's like, what does it say in the good book? Oh, that's what I'll do, rather than self-referencing. And I think similarly, I don't mean to have a pop at other therapists, but for me, codes of ethics are so that therapists don't have to think for themselves. It's like, oh, what are the rules? And I think it's essential to behave ethically, but for me, that means I've got to have a deep relationship with myself and my client. So if I'm following the rules and it says you must never touch a client, you must never have physical contact, well, what if that person in that moment of pain or anguish needs to be held more than anything, but the book says you can't? That's a problem for me. Knowing when to touch someone takes a lot of self-awareness and a lot of intuition or awareness of the other person. And, I have got it wrong. But like once in 27 years that I can think of, and that was with someone I'd worked with for about 15 years, and they were emigrating. And as they left the last ever session, I hugged them, and that really freaked them out because I'd never done it. And it, with hindsight, shouldn't have done that. That just felt like a human thing to do. But I tend to go on, like I say, kind of instinct. So there are people I may have worked with for 20 years who I've never touched because they've got some kind of sexual abuse history or something. And you can just feel the force field is like, do not touch me. And I totally respect that. There's other people that come in and it just feels right to hug them at the end of the first ever session. And that's something that's coming off them. So I think it does take, it's riskier. Following a rule book is easy, right? It's just you look at the book. It's riskier. It's more dangerous to kind of go off piste. And I think it does help if you've got some experience. And you have to be willing to apologize when you fuck up. Mm. And that means you can't be on a pedestal. You can't be attached to the idea that you're somehow flawless. And I was talking to someone earlier, and I was saying, for me, transparency is a kind of superpower, because if you hide stuff, if you hide your shadow self, if you try and cover up when you make a mistake, you're very vulnerable, because someone can find out your dark secrets. Whereas if you just share your dark secrets with the world, no one can touch you, because you're going, I told everyone I did that. Yeah. So I think it's a funny thing that humans do, that we hide stuff because it makes us more vulnerable. There's privacy. Privacy is different though. I think that's an important thing that a lot of people don't always differentiate between secrecy and privacy. Privacy is cool. We all need some of that, but I try not to be too secretive in my world. It has never worked out for me or anyone around me. So perhaps, but like I said, I don't hang out with therapists. Maybe they're all sharing their dirty laundry all the time.
I suppose you're bringing more of a human approach. You're more, I suppose, if someone's coming to you for help, it makes you more approachable, more human, as opposed to somebody kind of sitting there and going.
I think it's also, but it's like, if you come and see me, I do work with addiction. I'm okay with addiction. I don't know if I'm the best therapist at working with addiction, because I haven't really been an active drug addict since the early 90s. So it's kind of distant. I always say to people, you kind of want to work with me on something I worked out like 3 weeks ago. So it's still fresh and raw, and I'm sensitive to the pain or the struggle. It helps if I'm one step ahead of you, but you don't necessarily don't go looking for a therapist who claims they're fixed. I wouldn't touch them with a pole. It's like, there's no such thing for a start. And I think it's our rawness and our vulnerability. Like I say, you don't want me while I'm in the middle of some kind of collapse, because I haven't worked it through. But when I work something through and I feel I have some perspective on an issue or a problem, that's probably when I'm at my best, and it can be very fresh.
Yeah. You also mentioned addiction, mentioned drugs. And in our society today, and I feel this myself, I think there's a really unhealthy or misunderstanding around drugs. We live in a society kind of, again, these drugs are bad. Alcohol, things like that, our prescription drugs are good. And we ignore kind of, I think that, I forget the numbers, but I think there's some really high percentage rates in the UK, especially in America, where people are addicted to prescription drugs. I think there's in America Oxycontin addiction.
Yeah, I think they've got about, I might be incorrect, I'm not great with data, but I think there's about 30,000 people in America a year die from prescription opiates, like Oxycontin, far more than people die from street heroin, opiates.
How can, if you had the ability tomorrow, what way should our society, what way should we tackle drugs? Because I mean, I know I'm kind of, I know there's times I'm diving into a kind of very in-depth, very big topic. I mean, we had in the 70s a war on drugs. We had basically marijuana was labelled evil and wrongly demonized, and yet we're now in a kind of a stage now, or a transition stage, where weed's kind of being rehabilitated to the public. What's your take on the whole way, in the West at least, the way we view our approach on drugs?
Well, it's I mean, prohibition, as we saw with alcohol in America, what did that do? It invented cocktails. So it wasn't all bad. Prohibition doesn't work. The war on drugs hasn't worked. The war on drugs is rooted mostly in racism. So, opiates were banned because the Chinese in San Francisco were getting high on smack and running around raping all of our white women. Cannabis was banned because all the thieving Mexicans were getting high on weed and running around raping our white women. And cocaine was banned because all the blacks were getting off their tits on coke and running around raping our white women. It's that kind of rhetoric that got it all started. Then in the 60s, you had all these drugs that the CIA were experimenting to drop in Russian reservoirs and whatever, like LSD and MDMA, and there was some good work being done psychiatrically with those things, and they escaped from the lab, and so that all got banned, and so all the research got shut down, and then everything was illegal for a long time. And now it's kind of beginning to swing the other way, which I think is largely healthy. But whether it's legal or illegal or whatever, the point for me is education. We have to educate people, because these are dangerous substances, and they're powerful substances, and they're liberating substances, and they're useful substances, and they can kill you, and they can set you free, and they can be really fun, and they can be absolutely awful. They're not black and white, and there's a million problems with the war on drugs, which is it creates a black market, it creates cartels, that creates God knows how much death and suffering and torture and evil, and the amount of money involved. There's the fact that a lot of these psychedelics, are being recognized as really, really powerful tools to help people with dementia, with depression. So we have to let it out of the box, but there's not that many therapists or doctors who have the skill to know how to work with them, because they're all dead, because it was stopped in the 1960s, so we got to train up a lot of people. We got to educate the people. You can't just let it loose. I'm around the ayahuasca world. and I think it's a very useful medicine, and I would call it a medicine in the truest sense. And it's really dangerous because, not because the medicine is dangerous, because we, in our culture, we don't have many people who know how to prepare someone for an experience that insane, potentially, and we don't have many people who can help on the other side, help people integrate it. The same with psilocybin, the same with LSD, the same with MDMA. I think they're really, really, useful tools for someone like myself. And they can really help people where conventional pharmaceuticals sometimes help, but often don't. But yeah, we're way behind. I was listening to him. I think it was Michael Pollan, the writer Michael Pollan. It may have been one of the other guys who are kind of pioneering what's called the psychedelic renaissance. But he was saying never in history have we had something that's clearly really helping people just get stopped for 50 years, scientifically banned from scientific research for 50 years. And now we're starting to get these different modalities licensed by governments because they recognize, great for PTSD and blah, blah, blah. But we're catching up still. So I see, it's a complex thing. Personally, I'd legalize everything. Yeah, and the countries that have done that, like Portugal and Switzerland, if I'm correct, have the lowest death rates in the world, have some of the lowest crime rates in the world. Switzerland, if you're a heroin addict, you can get free smack from the government. You have to go at like 7 o'clock in the morning, which isn't the best time for a junkie, but you have to go at 7 o'clock in the morning. And you have to inject in front of a nurse to make sure that you don't take it and sell it on the street. But they do amazing, amazing kind of things. Like you can, they will incentivize businesses to employ junkies by paying half of the addict's wage for a year. So it's like, if you give this smackhead a job, you only have to pay him half the money for a year. And so the junkie has got a purpose, got something to get up for. Heroin's not, don't take this out of context. Heroin's not that toxic, right? Heroin's a shitty drug to get addicted to. I haven't been addicted, but I've known people who have. But it tends to only kill people because it's generally cut with a lot of crap, and occasionally you'll get a good batch come on the market and people will shoot the amount that they think that they're used to, which is cut with crap, baking powder or whatever, and they die because they take too much by mistake. But if you regulate it and give people measured, clean doses and give them a job which gives them some self-esteem and some money so they don't have to rob old ladies, you've solved a lot of the problem. Yeah. So we do need a massive rethink from something that's very based in racist fear.
Yeah. Here in Northern Ireland and right across the West, we have a big, large organisations that were once fighting each other and planting bombs on are now selling drugs. That's their main thing, and the power they have is immense. That is by making drugs illegal. It's a lot of power, a lot of money, a lot of influence, and they can rule their communities with absolute fear. Like in our society, if a group of people or a group of work friends went out, got completely permanently shit-faced on alcohol, it's kind of like good job, well done. But if someone in that office went, well, I'll pass, thank you, I'm going to go home and smoke a joint and watch maybe a bit of TV, druggy. There's really a kind of an all. People don't see alcohol like it's if society says okay, it's not a drug, they don't call it hangover. For example, if you're withdrawn from alcohol the next day, it's labelled a hangover, whereas everything else is labelled a come down. But essentially, a hangover is a come down. So definitely, I think we need. I think we've been avoiding the topic of the conversation for a long time as a society and culture. Going into plant medicine, and you mentioned there, and you hear more of it now. It's been mentioned from podcasts, etc. What was your experience with Ayahuasca? I know it's been used to help people with PTSD. different groups that kind of think, I don't think they're charities, but I think they kind of make the arrangements for people, maybe especially veterans from conflicts, to go to like Peru, I think it is, to get treatment. What was your experience like with it? And could you explain what ayahuasca is for people who maybe or haven't heard of it before?
Yeah, I mean, it's native to the Amazon. It's an Amazonian plant. I'm not an expert, I've done it 9 times, I think. So I'm not an authority, put it that way. But it's a ayahuasca is like chicken soup, right? It's not a thing; it's a recipe. So, it's got chicken in it, and it's got water in it, and whatever your mum puts in it, that's her particular thing. So ayahuasca depends on who brews it. There are certain plants, vines that they mix, and ways that they do that. So one brew can be very different from another. I've drunk various different ones, and they've all had a personality. I would say, in my experience, it's almost always been something of an ordeal. It's not a party drug. It's not something that I would enter into without being as psychologically prepared as possible. What does that mean? I think you need to do some research. You need to talk to some people that have experimented with it already, or you need to speak to someone like me who's a shrink who steps between those two worlds. If you're in the right headspace, then having an intention, knowing what you want to work on. There's this kind of mythology around ayahuasca that people say it's 10 years of therapy in one night, which it kind of is. But if you don't know what you want, it doesn't necessarily become very clear. It can be, it's like a dream. It's a bit like a drink that brings on a dream state where you're very conscious and present, and you can interact in that dream state. It's like a lucid dream, you could say. But I think it helps a lot to know what you're looking for. Someone asked the Dalai Lama a long time ago about psychedelics and whether they offered instant enlightenment. And he went, yeah, they do. But unless you've done 10, 15 years preparatory therapy or meditation or whatever, it's too big a download. If you think 10 years of therapy in one night, that doesn't mean it solves all your problems or that it saves you 10 years. It just gives you that data, and that can be overwhelming. And it can take you 10 years to process it. So he's like, there's no shortcuts. You still got to do the work. So I think that's true for me. I drank first when I was 50. So what's that, 7, 8 years ago? And it gave me a lot of self-compassion. It gave me a lot of understanding for people like my dad, who I'd always had a very, very difficult relationship with. I think I had much more empathy for him and people in my life. I came out of it with a huge sense of gratitude. It's very easy to go through life moaning about stuff all the time. And I think I lay on my bed and cried for about 5 hours with wonder and gratitude for how amazing my life is. And that never left me. It kind of flipped my glass half empty view of the world around. So that was really, really powerful. And then I didn't drink again for 6 years, maybe. And I went back 2 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I drank over two more times, 2 nights. And I found that much gentler. I think I was going through my 45th midlife crisis when I first drank. And this time I was in a much more settled place in myself. And also, I think I had a better relationship with the medicine. First few times was just going, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
Whereas eighth time or ninth time, it was a bit more familiar, and I could kind of surf it a bit better and navigate it. And this time it was subtle. It was a much subtler. I mean, really intense. The two words don't really go together, but it wasn't as much of an ordeal. I felt that with it's difficult not to get almost spiritual or religious about it, but in my case, and you have to remember with all drugs, including aspirin, there's 7.5 billion possible variables here, right? There isn't, this is what ayahuasca is, this is what ibuprofen is, because some people an aspirin can kill them, if they have some kind of toxic reaction to it. So probably even more so with ayahuasca, although it's very, very rare compared with vodka. So there is no formula or one way it's going to hit people, but I'm one of those people that for whatever reason, whether it's some crazy brain chemistry or whether I'm meeting God, but my experience is that I meet an intelligence. It's like somehow by drinking this brew, I get access to the plant spirit, and it's very clever, and it knows me better than I know myself, and it tells me about myself in a way that it's a good shadow tool, ayahuasca, because we go talk to a shrink. I've got a therapist. People come talk to me. I go talk to my therapist. You have to be kind of on the ball all the time to spot when people are dodging things, and they might change tack if it's getting too painful. And I think it takes a lot of self-discipline when you're in the seat, the hot seat, not to do that. Ayahuasca, you're not escaping anything. It's just going straight to the truth. In my case, there's no bullshit, and it's really on point. It's like meeting someone who knows you better than you know yourself, and that's, as long as you don't fight it, then that's the gift for me. And when I've recommended a lot of people to take ayahuasca, and I've drunk it myself. When I perceive myself as stuck, or someone I'm working with as stuck, then maybe 20-30% of the people I work with, that's something I might recommend. It's like, okay, your ego or your persona or your consciousness is getting in the way here. And for like things like pre-verbal, a lot of us are affected by pre-verbal things that happen to us or happen in the womb. Well, that's useless in talking therapy, because pre-verbal, there are no words, right?
Yeah.
So I've been back to the womb, and I've been back to very, very early in my kind of memory, pre-memory, really. And that's been amazing. Well, I mean, my favorite example, because when people talk about ayahuasca, they're always talking about demons and snakes and anacondas and dragons and aliens that operate on them. My favorite ayahuasca experience, perhaps, was the most mundane of all, which was, and I get a lot of time travel, so it's very 3D and very visceral. I was back in the bath in 1969. Nothing happened. It's not like my dad came in the room and abused me. Nothing happened, right? I'm just sitting in the bath, and I can see the carpet and the cracked tiles on the wall and the rubber duck. But what was mind-blowing was I could feel the atmosphere in the house. And whilst, like right now, I could describe the house, I have a memory of the house. But whilst under the influence of ayahuasca, I could feel the atmosphere in the house. I could feel how unhappy my mum was. I knew my dad was out, screwing his secretary or something. And the atmosphere was so unhappy. And I realized that as a 4-year-old, as a 5-year-old, I thought that was my fault. And by being taken back there, the message I got was, this had nothing to do with you. Your mum and dad had a bad relationship. She was doing her best to protect you from that by pretending everything was okay, but you could feel her unhappiness. And like all little kids, we look at our parents, and if they're unhappy, we think it's my fault. If I do better at school, or I score more goals at football, my mum or dad will be happy. So we take that kind of responsibility on, and it just kind of set me free from feeling responsible for the unhappiness in the house. But it's hard to remember an atmosphere,
Yeah. especially that far back.
Yeah.
Like, geez, if someone asks you about memories of when you're 10 years old, it's very sketchy. It's very like vague,
Yeah.
and it's hard to kind of really contextualize. Um, are you concerned about there seems to be a rise of ayahuasca? Apologies if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Treatment in Europe. Is there a concern that some of these groups are really setting these so-called, well, sorry, these treatments up? Their intention is really make a quick buck, and people could get hurt, or because I know when
Maybe. I mean, I think they're probably in the minority. I think the intentions of anyone who offers ayahuasca, it's probably a good intention. That doesn't mean it's a good thing. Doesn't mean they know how to handle it. And I always think it's, the indigenous people I know aren't too hung up about cultural appropriation. They're like, you guys have really messed up the world. You need this stuff, So I don't think it's a coincidence that it's been brought out into the West at this point in time. I don't think we have the skilled people yet to meet the demand, because the demand is huge, and the skill, the people I know have incredible skill. They're in the minority, so I imagine there's probably quite a few people whose intentions are really good, but not necessarily quite up to managing what can happen for people. And I always say, if you take ayahuasca, if you're from Peru or Brazil or somewhere, and you take ayahuasca because it's in your culture and you have a difficult experience, you just wander up the road and you speak to your nan about what her experience of taking ayahuasca was, and she'll be able to help you, right?
yeah,
You got to talk to my nan. She's not going to know what the hell I'm talking about. Who do you talk to? Especially because it's a Class A drug.
yeah,
So when something goes wrong, you can't go to hospital without risking getting in trouble. So that's a really difficult situation. So again, it's back to education and training people to manage, these. It's like a knife's not a dangerous bad thing. It's a dangerous thing. It's not a bad thing. It takes skill to know how to use a knife or a gun. On its own, you can't say it's good or bad. It depends on the skill of the person, and I think the same is true with a lot of, particularly psychedelics. There's some drugs that I just think are rubbish. I don't think crack does anyone any good. I don't think cocaine's good to put into your gums when you need to have a filling, but beyond that, it seems to just turn people into dickheads. I'm certainly not pro all drugs, but yeah, with skill, education, awareness, and resources to help people, then these are tools that we should be using in our culture rather than prohibiting.
Yeah, no, because from what again, coming from a limited knowledge base here, but from what I have kind of read or seen in interviews, it does seem to, actually, I think if it's managed right and the person's looked after right, offer some kind of comfort, offer some kind of new perspective on their own life, which I think is quite beneficial. Um, go, Going into obviously abuse, or can can we, obviously something you never really get over, but can you recover from abuse that it's maybe there in the background, but it's not there, it's not casting a long shadow on how you live your life? Have you found have you found it yourself with dealing with various people?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, these phrases that I think I'm guilty of using sometimes, that we probably all use, like getting over or healing. They're a little bit vague. I don't know what they mean, which is why it's a good question. Can you get over abuse? I don't know. I mean, you can't change your past. You can't change what's happened to you. Yes, you can make different decisions, and I think change isn't even a word I'm very interested in. I'm more interested in consciousness. because the more conscious you become, inevitably you will change. So I mean, the focus for me is on consciousness, and if there is such a thing as getting over abuse, I guess it's what you say. It's becoming as clear as you possibly can on how something has affected you, how it's shaped you, how it's damaged you, how it's wired you, and from that place making different choices. So I was abused when I was a kid by my best friend's mum. I'm very rare actually, I'm the only man I know or that I've met that I can remember off the top of my head. There may have been others, but I'm the only person I can think of that was abused by a woman. What that did to me was it made me kind of sexually, erotically hardwired to be attracted to selfish, predatory, mean, cruel women. And fear and eroticism became very kind of merged. So a woman that was threatening and scary, I would be attracted to, rather than having a healthy response. You know, someone who's scary and dangerous, we're supposed to be repelled by.
Yeah.
But my system was the wiring was messed up, and so I would find myself drawn into that. And I think that's very common with people who have been abused, is that they'll be drawn repeatedly into toxic relationships. The same is true in violent relationships, you know. So it took me a long time to, you know, it's work in progress. I was hesitating because it's not done, but to rewire my system and choose someone who I've been with now for 6 years, that is very kind and very gentle and very loving. And it took me a long time to commit to that relationship because I thought there was something missing. There was an excitement that was missing. And then I realized, yeah, there is an excitement that's missing. It's called fear. You know, fear is very, very close physiologically to excitement. So it's very easy for those to get mixed up. You know, adrenaline junkies, people who love base jumping or free climbing or any of these kind of things, they're hooked on the excitement side of fear. And the same is very, very true with sex. So a lot of people get into dangerous sexual activities who've been abused because of that wiring. So with some consciousness of how you've been affected and consciously choosing or repeating healthier behaviors and avoiding the ones that, you know, through trial and error we all find out really don't work for us, I think we can live a different life. Whether we're ever completely healed, I'm not sure. Ask me in 30 years.
Yeah, I think when you kind of go through kind of like traumatic experiences when you're younger, it's weird how like for myself, I was badly bullied in high school for the 5 years I was there, and when I left, I kind of went through like okay, I'm not a professional in saying this, but you almost kind of go in like stages as you leave it. I think when you get away, you think I'm free. That's me free from that abusive environment. But you're not. You have to kind of like for me anyway. I had to kind of figure things out, and various different things helped. But it's. I was talking to someone recently. I find myself back at education again because my secondary education completely tanked because of what was going on. And I found myself back in the classroom there recently, and it was weird. I could feel like I was back to where I was, but this time I could feel myself being on guard, and kind of so as you said, I'm still figuring things out. Kind of put walls up. I don't want to engage with anyone. I'll be polite. I'll say hello and stuff like that. But I'll just focus on the thing. I remember the teacher asked me a question, and I just took like almost like not a panic attack, but I feel this panic coming on. That if I get this question wrong, I'm going to be targeted and be bullied. And it sounds completely stupid. I'm a grown man, but I had this feeling that it's going to be bad stuff is going to happen for not being able to answer certain questions. And it was weird how I was aware of it. I was able to kind of almost like go, okay, I understand where you're coming from. Sat aside, still able to answer the question. I kind of messed up because it was kind of all tripping over my words to get the answer to the question. But I got through it. But I realised after that incident that in a previous time when I did try to go back to education a few years ago, the reason I completely tanked out of that course, the reason why I did was because it was almost like a self awareness thing. I was reliving what I went through in school, and I was kind of unfairly, I admit, imprinting on some of the people in the class, some of the people that picked on me in school. So that then brought my defences up. So to them, they would perceive me as hostile. But that was me kind of, I suppose, kind of protect myself, saying, I'm not a person to mess with. You need to keep away from me. I'm kind of like dangerous. So it's weird to kind of, I suppose it's almost like you're that was a bad analogy and I apologise. It's almost like your own cross to bear. You have to kind of figure it out, find what way to kind of carry it. If that makes sense. Does that sound right? Or am I completely off?
Yeah. No. I'm trying to think how long ago. It must have been like 8, 9, 10 years ago that that whole Jimmy Savile thing came out in public. And then you had this kind of domino effect of football managers and coaches and radio DJs that were being exposed, and Harvey Weinstein and what have you. So there's been this real wave of, I know it's a crass statement, but I say it anyway. Jimmy Savile's the best thing that ever happened to sexual abuse, because it exposed it as a serious problem that people felt able to speak out. It really helped, I think. I mean, for all the horrors that he did, it really helped. The same is not true with bullying. And I think bullying is, I don't want to get into kind of what's better, what's worse, but bullying is a terribly, terribly damaging thing that happens to people of all ages, but particularly kids, that I don't think we've had a Jimmy Savile moment yet where people have woken up and gone, wow, this is really harmful. And not just harmful in the moment, similar to with sex. Maybe it's not even a useful question. I often think with sexual abuse, what's the worst bit? When it happens to you in the moment, or the often lifelong after effects that, can trash people's lives in so many ways. And I think the same is true with bullying, because, and I'm not going to do therapy on you, but just now when you were talking, you said, this is really stupid. I'm a grown man. That's a message that's been imprinted on you, not by someone who's been kind. That's someone who's bullied you and told you you're stupid and you should be over this by now. And you've taken that in. And those bastards that bullied you when you were a kid, they didn't think this is going to be troubling him later in life. They're just taking the piss out of you because you're someone who's vulnerable that they can attack, because they got some shit going on at home that they're avoiding usually.
Yeah.
And that for me is what's really tragic, is we've all got an internal bully that we carry with us, that was kind of imprinted on us by some kids, by a nasty teacher, by the stuff that happens to various degrees. And in your case, a lot more so. I just think it really needs acknowledging, and it needs to be taken really, really seriously, because it can crush people. It's a horrible thing. Nobody wants to be ostracized. No one wants to be pushed out of the gang or the tribe. When you're a kid, you want to fit in. When I was 5, I remember, and I'm a lifelong hater of Marmite, right? But when I was 5, my mum would make me my cheese sandwiches and put them in my lunchbox, and I'd go to school and I would swap them with the kids who had Marmite sandwiches, because they were the cool kids and they weren't getting bullied, So you wanted to be in with them.
Yeah.
And so I'd swap them for food I hated. And that was how, even at 5 years old, how important it was, those survival things of, how do I not get attacked? How do I make myself safe? How do I, keep my head down? Because can be very hostile environments. And my kids were bullied. I took them out of school. It was like, okay, you're not going through this shit. You're out. And we home educated them for a few years. And now we got different forms of bullying, cyberbullying and that kind of shit. So it's, I appreciate you talking about it, because it's something I take really seriously.
Yeah, because one thing that I have to say, I've kind of, as I've been kind of processing this recently, one of the things that kind of left me with, and it's weird because when I'm with other people, kind of look at me and go, "Well," but one of the things I've kind of got from it is a very hyper awareness. Like I'll spot things, and I can't switch it off. And some people think, "Oh, you're paranoid," but it's in a way I see it as a good thing because I'm able to spot kind of subtle kind of people who may be like predatory, and they're trying to hide it. They kind of pick up on it, and then I'll kind of zero in, maybe a bit more control, but I zero in and kind of go, they're up to something. What? They're just standing there. No, they're up to something. How do you know? Just know. So it's kind of like as you said, it's fascinating how the kind of survival mechanism kind of you learn in that environment to kind of, I suppose it's the human survival machine being hardwired to kind of, like, we're in a threatened environment. How do we steer through this? Kind of continuing on with dealing with our own our own stuff. I want to touch on the book in a wee second. How can we make our demons work for us? And especially like self-destructive habits. Normally, a lot of people kind of, I've seen a lot of people myself who go to start something, and it's a brilliant idea. It's maybe a great business, or it's maybe like a new hobby or something, and they're really good at it. And you see them going in, and then kind of get that rush of excitement starting it, and then they kind of go, oh, "Who am I to be doing this?" And that person made a comment. How are we able? How can we better integrate our demons and kind of manage them?
I mean, in terms of self-criticism, it's back to consciousness, and I don't know that you want to make that demon work for you. I mean, self-criticism can be useful if it is harnessed in such a way that you can be discerning and you can be conscientious. It's a hard one because, most of us have one that just gets out of control and tells us we're crap at everything and trashes our confidence. So in a small amount, but I think that takes a lot of awareness. A better example perhaps would be addiction, which, well, I would go as far as saying that all addicts are obsessive. It's an obsessive behavior to be addicted to something. So I could obsessively take drugs. I can also obsessively write a book, and I kind of need that obsessive side, because writing a book's a pain in the ass. It takes years, and you got to keep writing it and rewriting it and editing it and going over it, and that attention to detail. It's probably why there's the kind of cliched tortured artist, because I think most artists, it's an obsessive behavior. I don't mean to dismiss people who aren't engaged in artistic things, but I wonder if you're working in a post office selling stamps, there's probably a bit more of a procedure there and a formula. And if you're painting an oil painting, or you're writing a book, or you're making a movie, or anything like that, I think it's such a kind of chaotic, unformed thing that you're trying to pull together into something cohesive. If you don't approach it with a degree of obsessiveness, you probably will quit, right? I think that it's something that has advantages, but if you got, it's like a horse. You got to know how to ride it, otherwise it's going to chuck you off, or it's going to do some damage. So I think that's one way of harnessing a demon, or just containing it. Like smoking. Tobacco has been a lifelong problem for me. That's a demon. I'm not sure it doesn't quite fit what I'm talking about in terms of making it work for me, but I'm damned if I'm going to work for it. And when I'm sitting here on the couch and it's pouring with rain outside and it's freezing cold, and that little demon goes, "You're going to the shops to get some cigarettes," and I go, "Oh, but I don't want to," and it goes, "I don't care. You're still going to spend £12 on something that's going to kill you." I go, "I don't want to," and it goes, "I don't care," and I find myself walking up the road in the rain. That's when I'm not managing that addictive side. So it's better that I channel it into something a bit more creative.
Yeah, I think it's just something kind of. I suppose it's been the kind of like for a lot of people, and from what I've been looking at the whole self-help, it's kind of almost like the holy grail, being able to kind of stop being procrastinating, stop bad habits, and all. I suppose it's this kind of understanding that your book, your latest book, Empathy for the Devil, Make Your Demons Work for You Without Selling Your Soul. How did the book come about, and what's the meaning behind the title?
Well, it's self-compassion. You mentioned the Holy Grail. It's a motif or a metaphor. I've studied a fair amount, and most of the analysis of that Arthurian myth seems to point to the Holy Grail being a symbol of compassion, which, Christ is the essence of Christianity, until it got twisted by us. To me, is a religion based in compassion. A lot of Christ's teaching are very compassionate. So that's what I mean by empathy for the devil. It's rather than good and bad. It's back to drugs, right? Drugs bad. No, they're not good. They're not bad. They're just a thing that you got to learn how to manage. People aren't good and they're not bad.
Yeah.
They're people, right? Who've got qualities that aren't so appealing and qualities that are lovely. There's very few people that are just one thing. Certainly there's no people who are just good people. Everyone's got shitty sides to them. And if you want to know yourself, if you want to manage your midlife crisis or have whatever happens, I think empathy and self-compassion, which doesn't mean you can do whatever you want, but being compassionate enough to move away from self-judgment into curiosity, so what is going on for me that I'm getting so drunk every Friday night, rather than, no, I'm such an idiot, why, but going beyond that judgment into an inquiry. For me, judgment is something that is only really useful in the courtroom, right? You've committed a crime, here's a procedure, you go before a judge and jury, the judge makes a judgment, that's why they call the judge. You're guilty or you're not guilty. End of story. It closes things down. Whereas if you're working on yourself, you don't really want to close things down. You want to open things up. So judgment, I'm just a dick. Okay, but you didn't really learn anything about why or what brought that behavior about. Okay, I recognize that every Friday I go and blow most of my wages because I'm so tired, because I'm in a job that I hate, that I never really wanted to do, but I don't really know what I do want to do. So I go get off my face. Oh, okay, that opens up some possibilities, which is maybe I want to spend some time really questioning what I want to do with my life. And then but I realize when I do that, I realize I got a message from my dad or from my school that, you can't do what you want in life. You have to just make some money. And maybe that's not true. It's an opening, but you got to have some compassion to do that. I think that applies to everything. Whether it's politics or whatever, you can just judge people and hate them, which we're very good at as a species, or you can be curious. What's really going on here? What's going on in Russia? They probably feel quite threatened by NATO. Do I think their response is good? Not at all. But, there's a bigger picture always. But if you just go, you're bad, we're going to bomb the shit out of you, it never ends well for anyone.
I think that's a really great point, because I think on one hand we judge ourselves very harshly. I know I do, and brutally. I've often said to people, my job is kind of as a coach, and I've said to people, if I coached you the way I speak to myself, you literally go, fuck off, give me my money back. How
Yeah.
dare you speak to me like that? I can be very harsh, whereas with other people, more empathetic and kind of listen to them, help them, and kind of give them solutions. But just like we don't do that to ourselves. And even like today, like where we're going, like I think today, um, it's horrendous. Like how we treat each other. I mean, if someone says something, cancel them. Get rid. There's just these barriers, and it's almost like even if I've kind of been on a journey in the past few years, really, and you find kind of the people that kind of I would kind of associate with as you come away from that, and you maybe go, well, hang on a second, this person kind of has a point. It's like, what? Oh, you must be one of them. It's there's no kind of middle ground. I think even the art of discussion or open dialogue, that seems to be closing. Um, is there a danger with where we're going now that we're so distracted that we stop looking inwards and trying to figure out why did I do that or what that thing happened to me when I was 10 years old? Or is there a danger that we're distracting ourselves to death without but not doing inner work? Is there that, or are you more optimistic that we are heading maybe in a different path, that we will start to look inwards and hopefully maybe we all become better versions of ourselves?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's more distraction than there's ever been in history available, and there's more information than there's ever been available. So again, it's not really about deciding whether it's good or bad. It's, I got a nasty feeling when I'm on my deathbed, I'm gonna look back and go, shit, if you gave me those years back I wasted scrolling through social media, I'd have another 5 or 6 years to live. That's going to be a regret. That's going to be a real regret. But at the same time, I couldn't write books or do a lot of what I did without access to the internet and this kind of vast, just endless, bottomless kind of encyclopedia of information that's just amazing. So, and would it even be a good world if we were all constantly, engaged in self-inquiry? It's just having. I think it would be a good world if we taught some of that in schools. I think if we incorporated maybe a bit of meditation or maybe a bit of communication skills, some of the kind of basics that I work with, it would be better if we learnt it in school rather than when we're 50 trying to catch up when we got divorced or we're not kids, our kids aren't speaking to us or anything like that. Some non-violent communication or any of those kind of things would be useful, and to encourage that kind of curiosity. I think curiosity is probably the greatest thing I've ever learned through all my therapeutic explorations, is just to be curious in that non-judgmental way. I think if you encourage people to do that, I think there would be less violence. I think there'd be less abuse. It's very hard to abuse someone when you're awake, when you're really aware of how you're impacting someone else. You kind of have to go into a auto state. And then, and so many of us do shitty things and we go, God, what came over me? I used to work in domestic violence, and it's one of the most common narratives. People go, it's not me. I'm not a violent guy. Just the red mist comes down or whatever. And there's this kind of disassociation from that person. Whereas the more we encourage kids to be in touch with themselves, who they are, what they want, it kind of goes against everything we're doing in our education system. So there might be a problem in that. But, the more you get people to, back to what I was talking about with ethics, don't follow rules, listen to yourself. That's a good thing to teach people.
Yeah.
But it goes against society because we do need people to follow rules. So, luckily I'm not Prime Minister. Didn't really want that job.
Yeah, because I feel now there's very much like almost like didn't see it. Maybe I was blind or stupid. I don't know, but I see more now. It's kind of like if you're on this side, here's your manifesto. This is what you expulse. This is what you believe. This is what's in. This is what's out. You're on this side, same thing, and you just feel. Again, as I said, in the past few years, I had a awakening. There was one guy who made comments. My wife's Polish, and this guy was in my work, and he made comments about Polish people. At the time, again, I didn't say anything, and I sort of again trying to turn over a new leaf from that. And the next day, somebody said to him, "You do know he's married to a Polish woman?" And he's like, "What?" And he came up to me. He's a contract. He came in, and I just went, "Look, no, it's." And we sat down, we talked about it, and what I found was that other people, he must be a racist man, a horrible man. He wasn't. I mean, I got talking to him. What he said was racist. But when you got talking to him, and kind of had this open discourse, he was able to say what he felt, and I was able to say what I felt. We kind of found common ground, and I find that there's some things that I don't agree with what he thinks. And there's some things he didn't agree with what I think. But I found that we were better for it. And anytime I see him, I go hello, and he'll go hello to me. And I think it's fine. Behind that, there's a human being. And sometimes I think we kind of maybe live life on autopilot, and we kind of get told, here's your script, here's what you need to think. And we kind of don't really sit down and go, like, why do I think like that? Why do I view that person like that, and vice versa? I think we need that more. Whereas I think, like, I feel like society is kind of like putting these walls up, that almost like peace walls, like we have in Belfast. Don't go beyond that because that's them, they're not us, and vice versa. And it's creating like this divide. Whereas I hope that like the podcasts, so like that'll hopefully break that down. Saying that you hear people kind of criticizing certain podcasts because they have certain guests on, kind of go against different viewpoints and stuff. You have your own podcast. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
I stopped it actually. I did have a podcast. I paused it for now because I was doing it mostly in lockdown, and I prefer the energy of being in a room with someone. I don't mind, I did some nice episodes on Zoom, but they were all on Zoom, and I wanted to get back in the room. And then got other projects going on. The book came out. I've got a film that is out at the moment, so I've had a lot of stuff to do with that, promoting it and going to screenings and what have you. And I have another film that I'm filming in May, so that's kind of keeping me busy. And I will probably come back to the podcast at some point, but it makes me appreciate what people like you do, because it's really hard work. It's a lot more work than I realized before I got into it. And I think it's a skill. It's a real skill. I mean, I felt prepared because I'm a shrink, so I've been talking to people for years, but it does take a certain amount of skill to guide the conversation so that hopefully it's interesting to a listener rather than just the two people who are chatting.
Yeah. I'm still working on improving my skills and stuff. What's the film that's out now, and what's the film that's you're going to be working on in May?
The film that is out now is called Make Me a Man, and it's I've run men's groups for 27 years now, and they're very private therapy groups, right? And I would often have TV companies, or not often, but every now and again, TV people would approach me and ask if they could come and film, and I always said no, because I think you bring outsiders in, or you even bring a camera in, it would just change what goes on in the room if we were being observed. And then, and one day I was sitting in this room with a group that's been going for, I don't know, 10 or 15 years or something. And I looked around, and I work with a lot of people in media and the arts and creative fields. And I looked around and I was like, hold on a minute, we're a film crew. Because there was a cameraman and a producer and a lighting guy and a sound guy who just happened to be in this group. So that was one of those moments where I went, oh, okay, so we could make a film kind of, but then there aren't any outsiders. So we started filming, and then I realized, yeah, but we're a bunch of men making a film about being men in a kind of post-Me Too culture. I don't think we can do this by ourselves. From my point of view, I thought, I'm going to make a defensive film. This needs a woman's perspective. Luckily, I happened to be in a relationship with a very accomplished filmmaker and a feminist filmmaker. And so I asked her to come on board, and she was kind of reluctant at first, but she got involved, and we filmed it. It probably took us, the first cut took about a year. Then we started screening it and getting feedback from people, and now it's finished, and it's out. It's out. You can download it, but it's out in cinemas in France at the moment. The English market's slower, but it's about men's work, and it's a film of a bunch of guys who've been working on themselves for 10, 15, 20 years. So it's just a different view, I suppose, that you don't normally see, of a bunch of guys who are brave and open and transparent and quite evolved, in a way that people who've done a lot of work on themselves can be. So it's getting a lot of positive responses, because I think it just shows a different version of conventional masculinity, so I can send you a link.
Yeah, that'd be great. I can include that in the source below. Do you find like when if you look at, like, in society, even when I was at school, women's health it's more open. It's kind of like, even as a guy, you kind of come across. I remember the girls out to talk about dealing with periods and stuff like that. Like a kind of issue. We were kind of kept separate from that. Men's health kind of ones in the back room, if that makes sense. Do you find it's a bit more of a challenge to get men to kind of come out, because you do feel, even myself, like, you do feel kind of there's almost a gatekeeper, like, in your mind, if that makes sense. Kind of like, we'll let this bit out, but that stuff that stays here, that's not going. There's no way we're earning that. Did you find that a bit more of a challenge when dealing with guys?
Yeah, look at the way that men are still portrayed in films. It's tough guys, hard guys. It's very rare you'll see a kind of soft, sensitive portrayal of a man. Sometimes, but it's a chick flick normally. That's how they can, a rom-com, or it's put into that kind of bracket. But the dominant thing is that kind of macho, fighting, aggressive, violent male John Wayne, Clint Eastwood type character. We haven't let go of that. Maybe they're wearing tights because they're superheroes, but it's still about beating the crap out of, violence is the solution to most problems. And, that makes it kind of difficult to encourage men. Hey, do you want to come and spend an evening talking about how scared you are, or how vulnerable you are, or how sad you are, or how you just don't know how to be sexual with your partner, you don't know how to communicate with your children? That's a hard sell for most guys. They go, why would I want to do that? What for? That would be weird. That would be scary. And the good news is, once you get them in the room, men are really hungry for that kind of contact. I mean, the thing that changed me, and this is a story I tell from time to time, but it's still such an important story, a bit, almost a silly story, a bit like my story of the bath and on ayahuasca. because it was such a tiny thing, and yet it was so huge. So when I was training in my first year, I think this is still pretty much the norm. There was 23 women, 2 guys training to be therapists. And so I, went in on a Monday morning, sat down in the chair that was available or whatever, and the person leading the course said, right, turn to the person to your left. Pair up, we'll do a little warm-up exercise. So I turned to my left, I'm sitting next to the guy. I don't know if I'd even noticed. And the facilitator said, okay, now find a way to hold each other physically. And I was like, really? I've got 23 women and I pick you? And I remember he sat down with his back against the wall and he kind of opened his arms and his legs so I could lean my back against his chest. And it was just amazing. I was like, whoa, I don't know if I'd ever touched a man. And my dad was someone who he was never around and we'd never touched. I think the only time we ever touched was he'd drive me to boarding school and in silence for like 2 hours, and then I'd get out of the car and he'd kind of awkwardly shake my hand and get in the car and drive away as quickly as possible. So I don't know if I'd ever touched a man, and this guy held me and it was like, whoa, this is different. There's a kind of strength and quality of energy I didn't know before. And then there was a kind of relief of, wow, thank God he hasn't got breasts. Actually, if I'd picked one of the women, this would have been really scary because I'd have been frightened that she would think that I was touching, or where do I put my hands? And there's a freedom from all that because I'm, pretty solid in my heterosexuality. So I don't feel like this guy's going to think I'm hitting on him, and I don't think he's hitting on me. This just feels like really healthy, physical, human contact. It's probably why I do what I do. I think that was the beginning of changing my relationship, because before that, men were people who bullied me, men were threatening, men were people I didn't respect, men were toxic, and this one silent, wordless piece of human communication kind of flipped it around, or was the seed that everything else grew from.
Yeah.
So random, I could have sat next to anyone else and I don't know which way my life would have gone, but that was really, really important.
Yeah, kind of, I suppose, sat like kind of a precedent of where you were heading to. We'll come to near the end, and this question will probably go, I'd imagine it's a question like not a question you'd be fond of, but I do ask it from time to time. What if you had to write down, or you had to kind of put it on the back of a business card? What would be your mission statement?
Well, it's a cliche. It's a cliche program. I mean, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, so I don't know. Maybe it'd be different if you asked me tomorrow. But that quote from Shakespeare, "To thine own self be true." I think that's what I'm talking about with teaching kids to be a bit more curious and self-reflect, self-referencing. There's a book that was out maybe 10 years ago now called The 7 Regrets of the Dying. And as I said earlier, maybe that will change now that we've all got mobile phones, but it was a palliative care nurse who interviewed a whole bunch of people on their deathbeds, and she put together the 7 top regrets. Number 1 regret was something like, I wish I'd lived the life I wanted rather than the one that was expected of me.
Yeah.
I don't want to die with that regret. I want to feel whatever I've done, whatever mistakes I've made, whatever, damage I've done, that I've lived something that was right rather than prescribed. And I don't know how common that is, because there is so much prescription and so much pressure on kids to fit into a certain mold. And yeah, it's tough. It's tough to go out and kind of forge your own path, I think. They did me a favor when I left school, and they told me I was unemployable. Right? That's what they said. Because of the learning difficulties I'd had, they were like, you're just unemployable. We don't know what to do with you. And that really did help ultimately. It was painful at the time, but it helped because I didn't try and get a job. I just figured out what to do by myself. And so I kind of, it wasn't through wisdom. It was through completely stumbling into what I do. But I couldn't do anything else. I couldn't really go and work for a bank. I couldn't really fit in. So my kind of wound became my kind of beacon, if you like. So yeah, I think to encourage people to really look into what they, unless you believe in reincarnation, in which case it doesn't matter. But yeah, jury's out on that one for me. I'm certainly living as if I got one shot, and I would definitely encourage people to try and be true to themselves, whatever that means.
Yeah, no, it's good to this. Because I think I say the big danger really is, and I've seen it as a child growing up. I've seen adults kind of, and my family being kind of almost like being dictated to in how they should be living their life. Whether it's through kind of like a very draconian religious kind of viewpoint. It, 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 that kind of, it's almost like I know conformity is part of the human condition. It has a kind of like evolutionary kind of benefit, but at the same time it can be very very controlling. I see a lot of people kind of who are scared to kind of go beyond the railway tracks, kind of go off those railway tracks, thinking, no, I need to stay on this because so and so and so and so and so and so will judge me to be X, Y, and Z, and so on and so forth. Jerry, how can people get in touch with you, and how can they purchase the book?
My website is my name, jerryhyde.co.uk. I can send you a link to that. The book, it depends, man. I think it's always best to go to your local bookstore and order it, but unfortunately most of our local bookstores have been swallowed up by the big organizations like Amazon, so probably you have to go on Amazon, but I'd rather you didn't. if you can put some money in some little person's pocket, it's better than feeding Jeff Bezos's great beast of a machine. Or order it online through some independent, bookstore would be good. Yeah.
And again, for everyone who's interested in the book's Empathy for the Devil, Make Your Demons Work for You Without Selling Your Soul, and that is available now to purchase. Jerry, thank you so much for your time tonight. It was great having you on, and it was great having a chat with you, and hopefully we covered, for anyone watching, quite a few topics. Again, you could drill into those topics and spend a whole one episode on them alone, but it was good being able to kind of take almost like a condor's view of that. But Jerry, thank you very much for your time, and good luck with your new film, your current film, and good luck with the film in May.
Thanks, man. That was nice. I enjoyed it. You got a nice, easy style. So thank you.
Thank you.